My name's Devine, I'm the Creative Director at DT.
I'm Lindsay and I'm a Solution Architect at DT.
We're going to talk today about collaboration, and I think, and ego and authorship and all of the things that kind of make up a project and an approach to work. And I think there was something interesting Alice pointed out there, is how do we define ourselves, and not only in gender but also in the work that we do. We're not entirely our work. You know, we have lives, we do lots of things. But over the last couple of years, and even a little bit before that, I've been really interested in the idea of how we work together. Because some of the most enjoyable experiences when we're creating work have been when a collaboration, you've learned something from someone and you've taught something to someone else. So Lindsay and I'm from a creative background, and Lindsay's from a tech background, and has a great title in the Solution Architect. I actually really love. I've always wanted to be an architect, yeah, so I'm pretty jealous. But anyway, so what we've done is we've kind of looked at our processes, the processes that we both go through, and how to look at how they can be very similar or very different in the way that we approach things. So at DT, we have every week, we get together and we talk about work we hate, work we love, work that doesn't inspire us, work that does inspire us, anything. We talk and we have a dialogue, and it's so important to our practice because we learn to talk in a neutral territory. We learn to be critical on a neutral piece of work. So we can say, that's fucking shit. And then when we come to, and explain why we think it's shit, and then when it comes to talking about our own work, we're better at talking about why it's shit. And we know that it's okay to talk about it being shit. Or really great, you know, it's not all negative. And Lindsay?
Yeah, so in the tech team, we do weekly code reviews, and we all get together, someone volunteers their piece of code, and we basically dive in and critique how we've formatted our code. Have we spelt things a particular way? And even, you know, trying to improve the solution that someone's actually built. So we're constantly refining how we work, and it's really important in our team that we kind of work together and learn how to kind of code together, so that whenever we pick up each other's work, we know what we're doing, so we're always on the same page.
And so in terms of, so that's kind of just how we train, I guess. So now we're going to go into sort of how we practice, how we actually ideate, and the processes we go through. Over the last sort of year, we've developed this, or sort of brought this to a slide or to a piece of paper, this process which has been around for years, and lots of other people do it in a creative space, but it's the idea of sort of having a very clear brief, very clear setup, going super wide, open, no bad ideas, refining, selecting some of the good ideas, then expanding on those again. It's hard to read what's on here. So this idea of being really open for the first few days of the week, really no bad ideas, so that you can't say that's a shit idea quite yet. You have to be like, that's not too bad. And then we close. Then it's like, that's shit, and let's not use that. This is good, let's expand on that and do that.
In tech, we kind of work on this agile sort of process, and this is kind of a compressed version. But basically, we get a brief. Someone like myself will read the brief, come up with a solution, maybe 3 or 4 solutions, depending on the time and things like that. And then we'll review that with our client, and then they will pick the one that fits them. Someone else will come in and build out the selected solution. Even they go through few iterations as well, because potentially the solution I might have written might not actually work. So we go back and refine that. And so yeah.
Yeah, so we have really similar processes of kind of saying, that's good, that's bad, that's good. And so what we're going to do now is talk through a couple of projects that we've been doing with Melbourne Central to sort of highlight how we've actually done some of these sprints. And also, we really want to push this idea of, you know, creative people can't create the work they want to create without tech people, and tech people can't create the work that they want to create without creative people. So there's an important, that's a very binary view of the world, but you know what I mean. So over the last 6 months of last year, we worked on some sprints with Melbourne Central. We did 5 sprints, which were 1-week sprints where we had yes walls, which I hope you can't read some of the ideas up there because they are sometimes offensive and awful. But they basically they're going through a redevelopment phase, which was set up by Luke Van O, who spoke earlier, who had a great talk earlier about brand. And Melbourne Central have basically asked us to look at how we can bring valuable experiences to shopping centres. So you go to a shopping centre to transact, but they're looking for a different type of transaction. And so they've come to us with a very broad brief of make it experimental, make it bring joy and surprise and educational. So the first project that I'm going to talk about is the Sudden Ionosphere Disturbance Monitor. So the idea here is that we turn the Melbourne Central cone, we reimagine what the Melbourne Central cone could be. And so I don't know if anyone's familiar with the magnetosphere or the Aurora Borealis, but I'm sure you are actually. But the way that works, the reason that that's seen and visualized is the Earth is a molten metal core. And as it spins, it creates an electromagnetic field, and that electromagnetic field stops our atmosphere being blown away by the solar wind. So it's one of those amazing kind of lucky chance things that is a thing that allows us to have an atmosphere. And so our project and our way of kind of trying something truly experimental for Melbourne Central was to come up with, to re-envision what that cone is, to turn that into something that is a functional instrument that isn't any longer a protective housing for what was something that was functional, which is the shot tower. So the question is, how do we measure that? How do we say that is actually the right idea for Melbourne Central? Because it's a very strange idea. We're talking to CSIRO, we're talking to the University of Melbourne Physics Department, we're talking to all these people and saying, can we do this? How do we do this? Is this the right thing to do? So through that, how do we talk to Melbourne Central and say this is the right idea? And I think tech has a similar process.
So in technology, when we get the brief, we're usually given a really clear, hopefully clear set of requirements from the client. We go through this sort of journey, which is not really a very straight journey to get to the outcome. But most of the time, we know what our endpoint is. We usually have a fixed set of outputs that we want to receive. So that's kind of our journey from there, whereas in creative, there's a slightly different metric to that.
That's right. So it's a really interesting thing. So some problems have very clear outcomes and some problems don't have very clear outcomes. So we use this for the Melbourne Central projects and sprints to define, to really categorize how well something works, to create a valuable transaction in terms of experience in the center. So as you can see, it's set up. We need equal elements of or high values of entertainment, education, aesthetic, and escapism to create the sweet spot, to move into the sweet spot, to make the experience the most enjoyable. So it's an abstract graph, but it's a great way for us to really sense check and objectively view the work that we're coming up with. Because a lot of the time, you could be way off. It just might not work in these cases. Which leads us into the work that we're actually in process of doing that I was working on yesterday. It's a regenerative sculpture. So we're creating a striking abstracted visualization of news media that's destroyed and reformed each day. So the idea is that we look at the news and we've become very, very, deep into what is news and all this stuff, and it's an interesting question in itself. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at news media across the web every day, understand it, analyze it, do a semantic analysis of it, and try and generate a three-dimensional form that's representative of the most trending thing, story in the news each day. Carve it out of a piece of black wax, a big bust-sized piece of black wax, leave it up to be viewed during the day, and then melt it down, set it, generate a new model based on the new news, cut it out again, and do that every day. So the question is, how do we move from the news to a sculpture?
So from the technology point, where we're coming from to be able to get to that point is what we'll be doing is grabbing a news feed from various different news outlets, and then we'll be putting it through this natural language toolkit, which is an open source package that we'll be using. What it does is it essentially takes whole series of texts and it breaks it down into tokens, it tags it, and then you can categorize them into themes or subjects and different collections of types of words. From there, that will then get pushed across over to Tim, where he can take those words and link them up with the forms.
Yeah, that's right. So that's our approach, is that we're moving from both sides, and we're ironically standing in exactly the right spot for this. But my job is to look at sculpture, to look at form, the psychology of form, and look at how we can distill that through formalized techniques to understand how we perceive form, to bring it down to its simplicity, to be the simplest art critic, to figure out how to critique art. It's really challenging, but there are ways to look at form, there are ways to understand how we experience art, how we experience sculptural art and form art. So one of the important things, and one of the things that's very possible, is that, before I go into this, we're telling stories. And one of the important things to note is we don't want to be too literal. And we came across this. I'm trying to justify the next slide because I had a hunch about not making the sculptures too literal or too abstract. And this validates the idea. So we're telling stories. And this is by the guy who's worked on Toy Story and WALL-E. It's the idea of giving the audience 2 + 2 and not 4. So letting them get to the resolution, letting them get to the solution. The way we're doing it, this validates our kind of approaches in that we don't want to be too literal and we don't want to be too abstract. If it's too abstract, the audience won't understand what it is, they'll feel alienated, and they won't get any meaningfulness out of it. If it's too literal, then they'll easily dismiss it and keep moving. So we want them to be challenged to decode it. So we're really excited about using that as a metric in our algorithm to generate the forms.
So now to get us to actually being able to build the form, we've broken down the process into various different parts. What it does is it allows us to add in or remove something that's not working or actually going to improve the final sculpture in the end. So, for example, potentially we might add in Deep Dream, which is a project done by Google, which they basically train a computer to recognize images. And so when you feed it an image, it will try and find images that it already knows in the picture, and then starts populating the picture with those until it finds another image that it knows, and then you kind of get a psychedelic picture like you see up there in the corner. So the whole idea that we can pull things out and add things in will help us to refine the final sculpture in the end.
That's right. So it's also always a constant process of refinement, and the idea of being able to think of things in a modular fashion. So what's important on this slide is not only the boxes, but the connections between the boxes. So defining what those connections are so that we can, as things get released, we can upgrade and grow, because last year, Deep Dream, Deep Learning, all these great algorithms got released, and they will continue to get released, and so it'll allow us to create more meaningful, more poignant work in the sculpture. When we talk about formal analysis of sculpture, one of the really fun elements to kind of, I don't know, we make a lot of assumptions. We're going to make a lot of assumptions, and one of the big things that we want to do is to test those assumptions. It's a massive part of Lindsay's job to test what's happening and how it's working, so it's absolute and functional. And one of the things here is we're doing with the sculpture is to look at how these assumptions are true. So we'll be doing tests using processes like this.
Yeah, so you may be familiar with this website, Symbolism, where they give you a word and then with the definition, and then you kind of try and associate that word with a color. It's a really interesting website because there's certain colors that I would pick for a particular word, and then when you view the final result, the subset of people choosing another color and it's even bigger, it's quite interesting because everyone's got their own opinion of what a word and a color is, and it's the same with the words and the form, kind of that analogy as well, yeah.
Yeah. So the next few slides, I'm not super confident to go through, actually. This is also one of those things where you're supposed to put your presentation in 10th of January, but I'm going to go through it anyway because we've got a bit of time. And I'm really excited about collaboration, and that sounds like it's a bit ditzy, but yeah, I'm interested why we do what we do, you know. You do a project and then you want to do another one. You keep doing these things. You keep working, you keep creating to keep creating. It's what you do. We're always in process. So we'll finish this robot and it will be out, and then what do? We keep doing, we do another one, we keep working at the things that we do. It's the most important thing for me to have realized that even if you do a project which you never thought you would do, you still want to keep doing the work, you know? It's important to just keep being aware of that. We need recognition for what we do. And one of the most important things, it's anonymous, I disagree with that slide, having put it already in there. And so one of the interesting things is for thinking about what is recognition? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it shares, likes, all these things? I don't think recognition that gets lost is recognition for what we do, you know, what you've actually done. So making sure you document and save what you do in your process, even if it's shit, even if it's good or great, it doesn't matter. Just share it, save it with yourself, keep it documented. And think about a process for doing it. I've got my own process to do it, and it's really simple, has a low barrier, and it makes a huge difference when I look back at the stuff that I've done. And then what is collaboration? What a great question. I feel like every time I think about this, and I'd be happy for you guys to fill it in as well, I always think about collaboration as this thing, is I can't make a robot on my own. Yesterday I was sitting with an architect, an automation engineer, and a programmer in a cafe having lunch, and they're all fundamental to this project, fundamental to making this project work. So it's important that we really realize that, and all the open source software that they are using and employing into all of that, everything adds up, everyone's contributing and really trying to see the entirety of what you need to actually realize something, and being humbled by it and being inspired by it. Yeah, and John Cleese, creativity is not a talent, it's a way of operating. So I hope you got something out of that, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.